There is no vehicle charging in my city, in New York City, in 2020 at least, that wasn't immediately accessible for me. The way you could charge a vehicle was that you would rent a spot in a private garage or in a private parking lot, which was a premium. So you would pay, I'm not joking, around $800 a month for that spot. And then you'd have to pay for the premium of parking in the spot that had the EV charger. And then you have to pay for the energy of that charger on top of everything else. So I was like, wow, that's a wealth barrier, right? Only the wealthy are going to drive electric vehicles, or only the wealthy would have the spare capital to engage in a routine like that. Well, this is silly. If we're really truly all moving to electric, someone has to be working on a solution to sort of democratize access to charging.
Welcome to Bite Size, a series where we highlight innovation across transport, mobility, and smart cities, and meet the people that are making it happen. My name is Emily Bobbis. I'm a road intelligence startup founder, and my goal is to combat the stigma that transport is uncool, uninteresting, and uninspired. Tiya, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast today.
My pleasure. I'm glad to be here. It's a pleasure.
I've been looking forward to this episode. I've actually talked to a couple of people about it before we've even recorded it. But I was hoping you could start off by telling the listeners a little bit about your background and what you're passionate about.
So my name is Tiya Gordon, and I am the co-founder of It's Electric. My background is kind of an interesting one in regards to where I'm working now in terms of transportation and energy. What I'm passionate about is good design. I feel like good design elevates the most mundane tasks, and it makes our lives a lot better. Even just thinking about the basic interactions you have on a daily basis with your phone, where the ease at which you can call an Uber on your phone or order food. Design really makes a difference in making your life a lot less complicated. And so that's really where my passion is how to use design, but then taking all the experience that I had and trying to think about how can we map the power of design towards helping to fight the climate crisis.
So you've actually got your own company that kind of addresses these two issues. So are you able to tell us the story about It's Electric and the problem that it's aiming to solve?
Sure thing. So I'm reaching you today from Brooklyn, New York, where I live in an apartment on the ground floor of an old building that's over 120 years old. And I don't have a garage or a driveway, and I also don't have a car. I bike everywhere. During the pandemic, in March of 2020, I really couldn't rely on my bike or on public transportation because there is so much unknown fear around the transmission of the virus. At the time, I had a very young daughter. So like a lot of people, I started exploring what it would mean to get a car to get us around more safely, even for things like, taking just trips to get some fresh air out of the city because we were all in quarantine. And I had not previously considered a car in terms of just who I was and the needs of transportation that I had. But when I had to start to think about it, since, I'm very environmentally conscious, I recycle and I compost. So I said, well, I should look at an electric vehicle because why would I get a internal combustion engine that relies on fossil fuels? But I quickly had to rule that out, because obviously I couldn't afford a Tesla, but there are other lower income or lower economy model vehicles that you can afford, especially used in terms of hybrid vehicles, Bolts, Priuses, things like that. But it really quickly came to bear that I couldn't get any of these electric vehicles because I literally had no place to charge it. There is no vehicle charging in my city, in New York City, in 2020 at least, that wasn't immediately accessible for me. The way you could charge a vehicle was that you would rent a spot in a private garage or in a private parking lot, which was a premium. So you would pay, I'm not joking, around $800 a month for that spot.
Ooh.
And then you'd have to pay for the premium of parking in the spot that had the EV charger. And then you have to pay for the energy of that charger on top of everything else.
Oh my God.
So I was like, wow, that's a wealth barrier, right? Only the wealthy are going to drive electric vehicles. Only the wealthy would have the spare capital to engage in a routine like that. Well, this is silly. If we're really truly all moving to electric, someone has to be working on a solution to sort of democratize access to charging. And when I discovered that no one was for cities, there's plenty of ways to charge your vehicle in suburbs, which basically just put a charger in your garage, but no one was doing that for cities. So that's how It's Electric was born, was trying to solve a problem for myself and for the 40 million other people who live in cities across the US.
You've mentioned something in there that's come up quite a few times with different people that I've talked to around electric vehicle charging, and that is that wealth aspect or that equity of access. Are you able to unpack that a little bit and how that then relates back to It's Electric and electric car charging infrastructure?
Absolutely. Right now in the United States, the chargers that are being deployed publicly are strategically being deployed by the charger manufacturers in areas where they will see a decent utilization, because the costs that they bear for the production and deployment of these chargers are so great that they have to make some money on it. Otherwise, it's not a good business model for them. But what this means is that the public chargers that are going up in the world are going up in areas that have higher median incomes. And also there was a great piece in Axios News in January of this year that discovered, even though we had all suspected it, but it did the research to confirm that there were far more chargers, to the tune of 2.5 times more chargers in census areas that were majority white than areas that were not. So equity becomes the headline. So we then started to ask ourselves this question: how can we deploy chargers without discrimination? Because there is discriminatory practice happening when you're deploying only in areas where there's high utilization, which is tied to median income, which can also be tied to, basically class. So for us, the solution for that was to design a charger that didn't cost, hundreds of thousands of dollars to produce and to install, which is currently often the case in some areas of the States, is the way that the chargers are designed and how they're powered. So we designed a really simple charger that could be fabricated and installed for a fraction of what the other chargers out there in the United States require. And now we can truly then deploy these areas not only where there's very high utilization, where you have 5 Teslas on every block, where people are taking their cars away to get away for the weekend, but we can also deploy those very same chargers in neighborhoods where there's literally no electric vehicle adoption, because you want to be able to signal to communities that there's charging near where people live. No one's going to make the adoption of an electric vehicle if they literally have no idea where to charge, or if they have to spend hours researching it. Why would they make that conversion? The country and the world honestly has to make the move to electrification as easy for people as possible. And that's what we're helping to do.
It's almost like a catch-22 as well, where you have people are like, oh, well, we're only going to put chargers where there are people that own electric vehicles, but then you're kind of then compounding the problem of, well, if the people who are in those areas with no chargers don't have electric vehicles, what's the incentive for them to do that if there's then no chargers? It's like, which comes first, the charger or the EV kind of?
Exactly right. And we like to say it's not chicken or egg. It's all egg. No one going to get an EV if they don't know where to charge. It's like, back in the day when people were first driving gas vehicles in this country, people would buy gas from pharmacies. That's where they would sell it, which was a fun fact that I discovered that I never knew.
Oh.
There were gas or petrol stations when things first started. So people would have to go into a pharmacy to buy gasoline and then put it into their vehicles. So, it's a new industry, and we're undergoing this sort of once-in-a-lifetime energy transformation. And so we should be aware of history and aware of how we design this so that we lead with equity.
In terms of even your own journey in starting It's Electric, what are some of the challenges that you faced? One of the things that I always like to tout about startups and innovation is that innovation doesn't equal acceptance, and that's like a really big part. But is there anything that you've kind of encountered personally?
Oh, yeah. I would highlight two different aspects. The first thing that I would highlight is I'll work backwards. We're about a year and a half old now. And in the last 4 months, so since January, February, March, April, so last 4 months of this year, we've gotten a lot of really positive attention. We've won a lot of awards. All of this has been fantastic. It's really validating. And when we started, again, a year and a half ago, people were so skeptical. And so, we would often get that response all the time, would say, well, if it's that easy, then how come a big company like a ChargePoint or Electrify America didn't do this 5 years ago? And, the answer was that, they weren't thinking about the problem. They were thinking about the solution that was most mappable to what we previously relied upon here in the United States in terms of how we fuel like vehicles, which was you went to a centralized area, which is a gas station. You had a short interaction period where you were able to very quickly put fuel in your car, which was a noxious, toxic chemical. And then you drive away. But electricity is an entirely different animal. And it's far more equivalent to coming home at the end of a long day and plugging your phone in than it is to the transfer of gasoline. The model that we're just going to convert what we were using before and switch gas for electricity didn't make any sense. That was the biggest challenge, was that, please, if I had a time machine and I could go ahead in time and say, here's the 7 articles that were just written on us. Here's the 3 awards that we just won. Like, we need you to have the ability to imagine a future with us. And I also, so this is my segue into my second challenge. I think that they could have imagined that future with us if I fit the standard profile of a founder, a woman in her 40s in New York City who's a mom. I'm not a 20-year-old white male Stanford grad. Had I had a different optical profile, I wouldn't have gotten so many no's when I first started it.
I was actually talking to somebody the other day, about how, because I think a common question that you get once you've kind of started a little bit of a business or a startup is like, what made you want to be a founder or something? How did you come up with your startup idea? And I feel like often a lot of people are put off because they're like, oh, well, I could never do something like that. And part of that is the narrative that is pushed in media of what a founder looks like and the kind of characteristics that they have, which then I think discourages a lot of innovation from happening because you can't be what you can't see.
Yeah, I do. I mean, and even as recent as yesterday, like, you're constantly being fed what the character description and the character quality of a founder is and should be. And it's someone who's pretty insatiable, right? Like relentless. And those are definitely attributes which I can easily apply to myself, but not in a pejorative way. Like, you can be relentless, but you don't have to be a terrible person. So what ended up happening was that we had to take a longer trip to find the people that would believe in us, that would invest in us, to give us just even the early capital. And in that journey of finding those people, it was almost in many ways worth the wait, because we didn't get the fast and easy checks. We got the harder earned checks from the people that truly believe and have conviction in what we're doing.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting, and it's often not a perspective that is widely publicized. But you were also part of a program. So there's a program, I'll do a little bit of an overview for listeners. But you were part of a program called Empowerism, which is run by a mobility agency called Move Me out of Canada. It's basically about getting women in shared mobility platforms and celebrated, I guess, more in the public eye. And you were part of that program. So why was the program valuable? How was the program valuable to you? And what was your experience like?
Absolutely. So it was, this was late last year that I was nominated as a finalist for this competition for women in mobility. And I was definitely sort of everyone else was definitely coming from a perspective of public transport and micromobility. I was definitely the only sort of rideshare private transport component of it, but I was so grateful to be involved because where else do you see competitions that highlight women in transportation and innovation? And what I like to say about Move Me is that it was like the happiest. I didn't win. Sorry, spoiler. I didn't win. And it was the happiest loss, the most gracious loss I've ever had in my life because I'm competitive. I'm super competitive. But I was like, no, like all of these people need to win, and I'm totally okay losing to everyone here. I almost wanted to withdraw my nomination because I was so excited by what the other candidates were doing. This one company who did win, with the exclamation point at the end, was shared cargo biking for cities because the number one pivot that pushes individuals and partners into vehicle ownership is when they start families. So immediately when we won, like my first response was, "Oh God, please come to Brooklyn! Like please, we need this. We need this so badly." So I have the most incredible experience with Move Me. Sandra and Venkatesh, who run the program, were nothing but champions for every single person that was involved. And it was just really nothing but a pleasure. And even though I have never met them in person, like we're now, I guess what you call it is social media friends. And we cheer each other on as there's wins on both sides. So I'm so thrilled to be even a small adjacent part of that community. And it's such an exciting community. It's so great. It's like, I don't know, transportation is something. I was just talking to someone today. We were interviewing this woman for a job at It's Electric, and she really impressed me because she said that the bar for transportation is so high. When the subway breaks down and it doesn't work, then you're raked across the coals, right? Mm. But every other day when it works flawlessly, that's just what's expected. So, we all just kind of go about our days and we take the fact that their traffic lights are working and that our roads are paved and that we can hop on the subway and that there's a city bike system. And you know what I mean? Like, and then when that doesn't happen, when I go to the city bike rack and there's no bikes, I'm the one who's cursing out loud because I have to now walk like 5 extra blocks to go to the next rack. So, I think that this whole new attention that's being paid to transportation in the wake of electrification is helping us truly understand and appreciate all of the women and men that are like working in transportation and have been, to move us, to put us where we need to be. It's such a cool group of people. And I'm so lucky to be involved, even again, from a small perspective of what we're doing for EV infrastructure with it.
So normally I like to ask people, what's a question you wish people would ask you more? And then we kind of flipped it. And it was that there was a question that people asked you all the time that you wished they'd asked you less. So what is one question that you wish people would ask you less and why?
The question I hate the most is what keeps me up at night. And the reason that I don't like that question is because it implies that there's problems that are so great that work and reasoning and partnerships and all the things that you do to do your job can't solve. I'm solving a very solvable problem. And so when people ask me this question, I just think it's silly because my answer to them is that nothing keeps me up at night. Because I have a very weird routine that was born out of the pandemic when we were all balancing full-time work and homeschooling of our kids when schools were closed. So I have this, I'll call it lovely new habit where I wake up at 4 a.m. And I work for about 3.5 hours until my daughter wakes up around 7:30. And I then get her dressed and get her fed and get her to school. And I go ahead and I do a whole work day. And then I pick her up from school and I get her home and we do dinner and shower and everything and more homework and whatever else we have to do. And then I catch up on some more emails after that. And then by the time it's time for her to go to bed around 9:00 p.m. Eastern, I am also ready to go to bed. I am so tired that I can't keep my eyes open because I've literally just put in, often a 16-hour day. So no, nothing keeps me awake at night.
Oh, so out of everything we've chatted about today, if people weren't listening, say for the last kind of 27 minutes, what are the key takeaways that you'd want the listeners to have, or like that one lesson that you'd hope people would take out of this episode?
Oh, okay. Lessons to take out of this episode. Number one is find solutions that can help improve the lives of your community. And if you can do that in a way that is viable, like can even become a business, like pursue it. Like this is how good ideas are born. It's from the imaginations of people that are living those own pain points themselves and can understand it from that perspective and then can make changes to improve it for everybody else, not just themselves.
And if people wanted to connect with you and learn more, how could they do that?
I'm very active on LinkedIn. So please definitely follow It's Electric on LinkedIn. I'm sure will you be able to put that in the show notes in terms of the link to our page?
Yes.
Oh, great. I love having conversations and reposting. LinkedIn is sort of like great because it's social media, but it's all professional. So I don't have to like post about my life. I just post about my work. So it's much easier for me as an introvert to do that. So yeah, that's definitely the way you can get involved. Also, the way that you can get involved is that we have a wait list at our website, itselectric.us. You go to get involved. There's a wait list. If you are an EV driver, more importantly, if you are an aspiring EV driver, more importantly, if you have a building in any city, I don't care what kind of building it is, if it's a house, if it's an apartment building, if it's a store, and you want to put an electric vehicle charger in front of it, a very small, very cool, very well-designed electric vehicle charger in front of it that earns you revenue, please sign up for a wait list. It's so exciting to see where we get interest from across the globe. And then what we do is we start to heat map all of that to try and understand where the desire is greatest and where we can start to look to deploy pilots.
Well, Tiya, thank you so much for your time today. Super interesting conversation and also very topical, given that I feel in the last even 3 to 6 months, the amount of conversations happening around EV and EV infrastructure has just kind of exploded. So it's super cool to chat about this and the future, basically, of what's happening.
Likewise, I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for interviewing me. This was a lot of fun.
If you'd like to learn more about any of the guests that we have on the podcast, more about Bite Size, or more about Compass IoT, the company that produces this podcast, you can visit our website, which is www.compassiot.com.au. Until next time.